The small, velvet-covered box slid across the polished mahogany table, stopping just short of my wine glass. Happy anniversary, Tinsley. Remington's voice, that familiar blend of boardroom boom and condescending drawl, filled the private dining room. His smile, as always when directed at me, was all teeth and no warmth. My name is Tinsley, by the way, and this was supposed to be a celebration of 5 years married to his son, Flynn. Flynn, bless his perpetually anxious heart, offered a weak, supportive smile from across the table. His mother, Rose, gave a tight little nod, her eyes flicking from the box to my face, then quickly away. I picked up the box. It felt light, too light. Thank you, Remington. My voice was carefully neutral, a tone I'd perfected over half a decade. Inside, nestled on a bed of cheap satin, was a necklace, a thin silver chain with a single, tiny, cloudy-looking stone. It looked like something you'd win at a carnival. Just a little something, Remington said, leaning back, steepling his fingers. To mark the occasion. More than you deserve, I'd say, but we must keep up appearances, mustn't we? A familiar chill snaked down my spine, quickly followed by a surge of heat. Flynn shifted uncomfortably, staring intently at his bread roll as if it held the secrets to the universe. He wouldn't say a word. He never did. That was Flynn. It's lovely, I managed, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. I even made a show of trying to fasten the clasp, fumbling deliberately. Here, let me. Flynn mumbled, finally looking up, his hand brushing mine as he reached for it. His fingers were clumsy. Don't bother, son. Remington waved a dismissive hand. She can figure it out. Or not. Doesn't really matter, does it? He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Rose sipped her water, her expression unreadable. 5 years. 5 years. Of moments just like this. The subtle digs, the outright insults, the constant, grinding insinuation that I was nothing more than a pretty face who'd lucked into their wealthy family. The gold digger label had been practically stitched to my forehead from day one. They never seemed to consider that I might have a thought in my head beyond which designer handbag to buy with Flynn's allowance. An allowance, by the way, that I rarely touched. Remington cleared his throat, signaling a shift in topic. Speaking of appearances, the annual Shaw Corporation gala is next month. This one is particularly crucial. He paused for a dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping over us. We're courting a significant new investor, someone who could really change the game for us, Emiliano Kennedy, a very big fish. Flynn perked up. Emiliano Kennedy? Wow, Dad, that's huge. Indeed, Remington preened. Everything needs to be perfect, flawless, which brings me to you, Tinsley. I braced myself. I have a very important task for you, he continued, a patronizing glint in his eye. The floral arrangements. I want something tasteful, elegant. You can handle that, can't you, dear? It'll give you something to focus on. Picking out flowers. That was my significant contribution. While they were wooing titans of industry, I was to be relegated to petals and stems. The dismissal was so blatant, so practiced, it was almost an art form. Of course, Remington, I said, my smile unwavering. I'd be happy to. Good. He nodded, satisfied. See that you don't make a mess of it. The rest of the dinner passed in a similar vein, Remington pontificating about his business acumen, Flynn nodding along eagerly, Rose making the occasional brief comment about the food or the wine. I ate slowly, methodically, the cheap necklace still in its box beside my plate, a constant, glittering reminder. They thought they knew me. They saw the quiet wife, the compliant daughter-in-law, the woman who smiled politely through their thinly veiled contempt. They had no idea who I really was, what I was capable of. They had no idea about the patience I'd cultivated, the slow, meticulous burn of a long game. A very long game. Later, as Flynn fumbled with his keys at our front door, I clutched the small velvet box in my hand. The metal of the cheap clasp felt cold against my palm. He was rambling about how important this Kennedy deal was for his father, for the company, for us. I tuned him out. Inside, I excused myself, heading straight for the powder room. The necklace looked even worse under the bright vanity lights. I dropped it onto the marble countertop with a small clink. My phone, tucked into my clutch, vibrated. I pulled it out. A single new message. It read, Phase 1 complete. M. A small smile, a real one this time, played on my lips. I glanced at my reflection. The polite, demure mask was gone. In its place, something harder, something far more determined. Remington wanted me to pick out flowers. Oh, I'd give them flowers, all right. And so much more. The memory was sharp, like a shard of glass. We'd been married maybe 6 months. A dinner party at Remington and Rose's sprawling estate. I'd worn a new dress, something I'd saved up for, hoping to make a good impression. Is that new Tinsley? Rose had asked, her voice dripping with a sweetness that never quite reached her eyes. Yes, I'd said, a little too eagerly. I got it at. Let me guess, Remington interrupted, swirling his brandy. One of those little boutiques that overcharges for polyester? He winked at one of his cronies, who let out a hearty, sycophantic laugh. Flynn, standing beside me, just coughed and took a sudden interest in a nearby painting. My cheeks burned. I'd wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Later that night, in the car, I'd whispered, Flynn, why didn't you say something? He'd sighed, that weary, put-upon sound I'd come to know so well. Tins, you know how Dad is. He doesn't mean anything by it. It's just his way. Don't be so sensitive. Sensitive? I'd repeated, my voice barely a breath. He humiliated me. Oh, come on, it wasn't that bad. Just try to fit in a bit more, okay? For me? He'd patted my hand, his eyes pleading. Fit in, as if I were a poorly chosen accessory he was trying to make work with his ensemble. That was the moment, the precise, crystallizing instant I knew Flynn would never be my partner, not really. He would always choose them, their approval, their comfort over mine. He was a product of their world, and I would forever be an outsider they tolerated. The realization didn't break me. It forged something new inside me, something cold and hard and resolute. If I wanted respect, if I wanted control over my own life, I'd have to take it. My grandmother, Nana Bia, had been a woman carved from granite and wit. She'd run her own small business, a bakery, from the age of 20 until she retired at 70, out-earning my grandfather and never letting anyone tell her what she couldn't do. When she passed, just before I met Flynn, she left me a modest inheritance. Not millions, but enough. Don't you dare let some man fritter this away, Tinsley. Her note, tucked in with the bank papers, had read. Invest it. Make it grow. Make yourself. I took her words to heart. I devoured books on investing, on market trends, on financial strategy. I started small, cautiously, learning the ropes. Nana B had always said, the best revenge is a life well lived and a bank account they can't touch. Then came Maya. We'd been inseparable in college, two nerds with big dreams. She was a coding genius with a mind like a steel trap. After graduation, she'd bounced around a few soul-crushing tech jobs. I called her one rainy afternoon, 2 years into my marriage, the sting of a particularly vicious comment from Remington still fresh. Maya, I'd said, I have an idea. A crazy one. We met for coffee. I laid it all out. My growing investment portfolio, my desire for something more, something mine. I want to build something, I told her. Something they can't touch, can't belittle. Maya listened, her dark eyes intense. When I finished, she grinned. So, you want to go into business? With me? What kind of business? Tech consulting, I said, but discreet. We focus on corporate intelligence, turnarounds for companies that are quietly failing. We find the rot, we fix it, or we advise on how to cut it out. Under the radar, highly effective. Skills I realized even then I was honing for a much more personal project. And so, Bellwether Solutions was born, a deliberately bland name for a company that was anything but. Maya was the tech brains. I was the strategist, the analyst, the one who could see the patterns in the chaos. We worked from our laptops, building a reputation for surgical precision and absolute discretion. Our client list grew, our profits soared, and no one in Flynn's world, least of all the Shaws, had a clue. They still saw me as Tinsley, the pretty, slightly dim wife, good for choosing floral arrangements. The memory of that conversation with Maya warmed me, even now, standing in the hallway of the house Flynn and I shared, the house that always felt more like theirs than ours. I was supposed to be researching florists. Instead, I was listening. Remington's voice, usually so confident, was tight with agitation. He was in his study, the door slightly ajar, on the phone. What do you mean he's getting cold feet? What rumors? This Kennedy deal has to happen. A pause. Then, louder, more frantic, "Instability? What damned instability? Shawcorp is solid as a rock. Someone is spreading lies, that's what this is. Find out who, and fix it." He slammed the phone down. I heard him pacing, muttering. I leaned against the wall, a genuine smile touching my lips. The rumors of instability, carefully curated pieces of information, expertly leaked through untraceable channels. Maya was a true artist. Phase 2 was well underway. Emiliano Kennedy was indeed a very big fish, and it seemed he was starting to notice the murky water around Shaw Corporation. Just as planned. The file on my laptop was labeled Project Nightingale, a code name Maya and I had giggled over. It was anything but delicate. Inside were spreadsheets, internal memos I definitely wasn't supposed to have, and a detailed analysis of Shaw Corporation's glaring weaknesses. Remington ran the company like a feudal lord, rewarding loyalty over competence, clinging to outdated practices, and making multi-million-dollar decisions based on ego rather than evidence. Disgruntled mid-level managers, passed over for promotion in favor of Remington's golfing buddies, had been surprisingly willing to share information with an anonymous online researcher, Maya, of course. "He's over-leveraged on the new European expansion," I murmured, tracing a line on a financial statement projected onto my home office wall. "And this vanity project resort in the Caribbean, it's bleeding money. And every time there's a whisper of bad news or a missed earnings target, the stock takes a little dip," Maya said, her voice crisp through my AirPods. We were on one of our late-night strategy calls, which is when our anonymous little investment group, Phoenix Holdings, just happens to snap up a few more shares. "Phoenix Holdings," I repeated, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips, rising from the ashes. It felt appropriate. For years, every bonus Bellwether Solutions earned, every successful investment I made outside of it, had been funneled into Phoenix. Slowly, patiently, we were accumulating. The next morning, I was in a sleek, minimalist downtown office. Jared, my lawyer, looked up as I entered. He was sharp, impeccably dressed, and had a mind like a steel trap. When I'd first approached him a year ago, outlining my long-term intentions for Shaw Corporation, he'd raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "That's ambitious, Tinsley." "Ambitious or overdue?" I'd countered. "Now?" He just nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "The framework is solid," he said, tapping a thick document on his desk. "We've structured Phoenix Holdings to be airtight. When you're ready to make the move, it will be swift and legal." He paused. "You understand the implications, Tinsley? This isn't just business. Well, this is war of a sort." "I understand perfectly, Jared," I replied, my voice calm. "They've been waging a quiet war against me for years. It's time I returned fire." My resolve was absolute. The years of quiet humiliation, of being underestimated and dismissed, had forged an armor around my heart, an armor made of cold, hard cash, and even colder determination. That Sunday was the obligatory family brunch at Remington and Rose's. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Remington was unusually quiet, picking at his food, his brow furrowed. The rumors about Emiliano Kennedy's hesitation were clearly taking their toll. Flynn, ever the dutiful son, kept trying to jolly him up with talk of golf handicaps and stock market optimism, his efforts falling painfully flat. Rose, however, was different. She was watching me, not with her usual cool disdain, but with an intensity that was unsettling. Her gaze followed me as I offered to help clear the plates, as I made polite small talk with a distant cousin. It wasn't overtly hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. It was appraising, as if she were seeing me for the first time, or perhaps seeing something she hadn't noticed before. I met her gaze a few times, offering a bland, pleasant smile. She didn't smile back, just held my eyes for a beat too long before looking away. It was a strange, almost imperceptible shift, but I filed it away. Later that evening, Flynn found me in our walk-in closet, ostensibly looking for something to wear to the gala. He held up a dress, a deep emerald green silk, a beautiful gown I'd bought for a charity event 2 years prior. "You should wear this to the gala," he said, his voice earnest. "Remember this one? Dad made that joke about you looking like you were auditioning for The Wizard of Oz because of the color." He chuckled, oblivious. "He'd find it amusing if you wore it again. Show you're a good sport." I stared at the dress. I remembered the joke. I remembered the snickers from his parents' friends. I remembered the way Flynn had laughed along a little too loudly. Amusing. He thought his father publicly mocking me was amusing. My fingers tightened on the hanger I was holding. You think so, Flynn? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. Yeah, it'll be great. Break the ice, you know. He beamed, clearly proud of his helpful suggestion. The fire that had been simmering inside me for years flared, hot and fierce. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about dignity. My dignity. And I was going to reclaim it, no matter the cost. Thank you for the suggestion, Flynn, I said, my voice smooth as glass. I'll certainly consider it. He smiled, satisfied, and wandered off, whistling. I looked at the emerald green dress, then at my reflection in the mirror. Oh, there would be a show at the gala, all right, but it wouldn't be the one anyone was expecting. The atmosphere at Shaw Corporation headquarters in the week leading up to the gala was like a tautly wound spring. You could practically taste the anxiety in the air. Remington, usually so bombastic and self assured, was a whirlwind of nervous energy, snapping at underlings and pacing his office like a caged lion. The whispers about Emiliano Kennedy's potential investment, or lack thereof, had grown louder, more persistent. I, of course, was the picture of serene domesticity. I made several trips to the office, ostensibly to discuss floral arrangements with Remington's increasingly frazzled assistant, Haley. Haley was young, ambitious, and utterly terrified of her boss. She also possessed an almost pathological need to be liked and to be seen as in the know. Mr. Shaw is just under a lot of pressure, Tinsley. Haley confided one afternoon, her voice hushed as she nervously shredded a paper napkin in the staff canteen where I'd coincidentally bumped into her. This Kennedy deal is everything. He's been on the phone nonstop, trying to reassure him. Oh, I'm sure it will all work out, I said, offering what I hoped was a sympathetic, if slightly vacant smile. Remington always gets what he wants, doesn't he? I stirred my coffee, feigning disinterest. It must be fascinating working so closely with him on such important matters. Haley preened. It is. I mean, it's stressful, but I'm learning so much. She leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, Mr. Kennedy's people have been asking a lot of questions about everything: financials, future plans, leadership stability. Leadership stability? I echoed, widening my eyes innocently. Is there a problem? Oh, no, not really. Haley backtracked quickly. Just, you know, due diligence. Mr. Shaw has it all under control. But her eyes darted nervously towards Remington's office door, betraying her unease. Perfect. My carefully constructed gold digger persona, the one they'd all so readily accepted, was proving to be an invaluable asset. No one suspected the vapid daughter in law of having any interest in, let alone understanding of, corporate strategy. I was invisible, and in my invisibility, I saw everything. The nervous glances between executives, the hushed conversations in hallways, the discarded printouts in recycling bins. Each little piece of intel was relayed to Maya. The dossier on your proposed vision for the company has been delivered to Kennedy's primary advisor, Maya confirmed during one of our encrypted calls. Anonymously, of course, contrasting your clear, forward thinking strategy with Remington's current, let's call it chaotic improvisation. Excellent, I said. We weren't just highlighting Remington's failings, we were presenting a viable, compelling alternative, an alternative headed by someone they didn't even know existed in a corporate sense. The day before the gala, Haley called me, her voice practically vibrating with excitement and self importance. Tinsley, oh my gosh, you will not believe the latest. What is it, Haley? I asked, injecting a note of bored curiosity into my tone. I was, in fact, meticulously reviewing the final share purchase agreements with Jared via video conference, my laptop screen hidden from Flynn's view. Mr. Shaw is planning a huge surprise announcement at the gala tomorrow night, she gushed. He just finalized it, a new succession plan. I paused, my pen hovering over the signature line. A succession plan? Yes, he wants to show everyone, especially Mr. Kennedy, that Shaw Corp has a strong future. He's going to name his successor. Haley paused for dramatic effect. And get this, it's not Flynn. My blood ran cold for a split second, then a strange sort of calm settled over me. Of course he wouldn't name Flynn. That would mean acknowledging Flynn had some capability. Oh? I kept my voice even. No, it's one of his nephews, I think. Daniel? Or David? One of the ones from the Boston branch. Someone young, dynamic, he said. He wants to make it clear the company is moving forward, but with his bloodline firmly in control. He even said something about it being a way to ensure the family legacy isn't diluted. Haley giggled. I think he meant you, no offense. He wants to make sure Flynn is, well, sidelined, and that there's no question of you having any real influence ever. No offense, as if I were a mild inconvenience rather than a person he was actively, publicly planning to humiliate further, along with his own son. The sheer arrogance, the casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just trying to impress Kennedy, he was using the gala as another opportunity to put me, and by extension Flynn, firmly in our place. Wow, Haley, I said, my voice a perfect imitation of breathless surprise. That is big news. Thank you for letting me know. You're always so on top of things. I try, she chirped, pleased with herself. I ended the call. Jared was watching me, his expression unreadable. Everything all right, Tinsley? I looked down at the document on my screen. The final block purchase of Shaw Corporation shares. Enough to tip the scales. Enough for 51%. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. Everything, I said, is perfect. I clicked Authorize. The confirmation flashed on the screen. Transaction complete. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Maya. Showtime. The ballroom glittered. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears, casting a dazzling, almost painfully bright light over the assembled crowd. Hundreds of people, the cream of the city's business elite, mingled, their laughter a little too loud, their smiles a little too fixed. It was a masterclass in forced joviality, an ocean of expensive silks and tailored suits bobbing on a current of underlying panic. Shaw Corporation's annual gala was always an event, but tonight the stakes felt astronomically high. Remington was in his element, or at least a frantic imitation of it. He moved through the room like a shark, all predatory smiles and firm handshakes, his eyes constantly scanning, searching. He was looking for Emiliano Kennedy, the elusive investor who held the company's future in his well-manicured hands. But Kennedy, it seemed, was fashionably late, or perhaps strategically absent. Flynn hovered near his father, a pale imitation of Remington's forced confidence. He kept shooting me anxious glances, as if my mere presence was a potential landmine. I'd chosen my dress carefully, not the emerald green he'd suggested, but a column of midnight blue silk, elegant, understated, and utterly forgettable, or so I hoped they'd think. I offered him a serene smile each time he looked my way, a smile that promised absolutely nothing. Tinsley, darling, you look presentable. The wife of one of Remington's board members, a woman whose face was pulled so tight she looked perpetually surprised, air kissed me, her perfume cloying. Thank you, Eleanor, I said. You look lovely as always. Yes, well, one tries. She sighed, her gaze sweeping over me dismissively before she moved on to someone she clearly deemed more important. The usual condescending remarks washed over me, barely registering. Years of practice had made me adept at deflecting them, at letting them slide off my carefully constructed facade of polite indifference. Tonight, they felt different. Tonight, they were fuel. Each little slight, each patronizing comment was another log on the pyre I was about to ignite. Remington, after a particularly animated and likely fruitless conversation with a minor city councilman he was trying to impress, grabbed a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray. He'd had a few already. A telltale flush was creeping up his neck. He spotted a group of older, more conservative investors, the kind who still believed a woman's place was in the home, or at least not in the boardroom. An idea, a truly terrible, Remington-esque idea, visibly sparked in his eyes. He was going to make a point. And I apparently was going to be his prop. He strode towards the small, elegantly draped stage at the front of the ballroom, tapping a fork against his glass to command attention. The chatter gradually died down. Friends, colleagues, esteemed guests, Remington began, his voice amplified by the microphone booming through the suddenly silent room. Welcome to what I know will be a memorable evening. He paused, beaming, clearly relishing the spotlight. He spoke for several minutes, a rambling monologue about Shaw Corporation's glorious past and its even more glorious future, conveniently glossing over the current uncertainties. Flynn watched him with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Rose, seated at a prominent table near the front, wore her usual stoic expression, though I thought I detected a flicker of something weary in her eyes. Then, Remington's gaze found me, standing quietly near the edge of the crowd. A smirk, ugly and triumphant, spread across his face. He was emboldened by the champagne, by the captive audience, by his own inflated sense of importance. He was about to perform for what he believed was a traditionalist audience, eager to see a patriarch put his flighty daughter-in-law in her place. And he continued, his voice taking on a syrupy, condescending tone, I'd like to give a special thank you to my lovely daughter-in-law, Tinsley. All eyes in the room swiveled towards me. I could feel the heat of their collective gaze. Always so supportive, always there, even if he paused, letting the insinuation hang in the air. It's just by looking pretty. A smattering of polite, uncomfortable titters rippled through the room. My blood, which had been simmering, turned to ice, then instantly to molten lava. This was it, the moment I'd both dreaded and anticipated. Remington reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. With a flourish, he extracted a bill, a 20. He held it up, displaying it to the crowd as if it were a prize. Then, with a sneer that twisted his features into a grotesque mask of contempt, he looked directly at me and said, his voice dripping with disdain, Here you go, dear. Go buy yourself something pretty, little gold digger. He flicked the $20 bill. It fluttered through the air, a pathetic, insulting green rectangle, and landed at my feet. The room erupted, not in outrage, but in a wave of snickers, nervous laughter, and a few outright guffaws from his closest cronies. They thought it was hilarious. A powerful man, putting his upstart, gold-digging daughter-in-law in her place. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of fury and exhilaration. This was more than I could have ever hoped for. He'd handed me the perfect opening, gift-wrapped in his own arrogance. The laughter, sharp and cruel, echoed in the sudden, ringing silence that followed Remington's pronouncement. It felt like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Years of enduring their casual cruelty had forged an iron composure, and tonight it was my shield and my weapon. Slowly, deliberately, I bent down and picked up the $20 bill. The paper felt flimsy, almost insulting in my fingers. I smoothed out the creases, my movements unhurried, graceful. Every eye in that vast ballroom was on me. I could feel their curiosity, their pity, their morbid anticipation. What would the pretty little gold digger do now? Burst into tears? Flee in shame? Flynn looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face was ashen, his mouth agape. He took a hesitant step towards me, then stopped, his eyes darting towards his father. He looked utterly, hopelessly trapped. As always, he said nothing. His silence was a familiar wound, but tonight it barely registered. He was irrelevant. Remington, on the stage, beamed. He puffed out his chest, basking in what he clearly perceived as a moment of absolute triumph. He'd put me in my place, publicly, definitively. He'd shown everyone who was boss. He was the king, and I was just a court jester, good for a laugh. A strange sense of calm washed over me, a profound stillness in the eye of the storm. This was it, the culmination of 5 years of meticulous planning, of silent suffering, of carefully hoarded resentment. All of it, every insult, every dismissal, every condescending smile had led to this single, perfect moment. A surge of power, cold and exhilarating, coursed through my veins. I straightened up, the $20 bill held lightly in my hand. I didn't look at Flynn. I didn't look at the shocked faces in the crowd. My gaze was fixed on Remington, still preening on the stage. Then I began to walk. Not away, not towards the exit in a storm of humiliated tears as they undoubtedly expected. I walked towards the stage. Towards him. My heels clicked softly on the polished marble floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the suddenly hushed room. The spotlight, which had been on Remington, wavered, then found me, following my slow, deliberate progress. The whispers died. The nervous titters ceased. A thick, expectant silence descended, heavy and suffocating. They were waiting, waiting for the drama, the tears, the inevitable retreat of the humiliated wife. I could feel their collective breath held in suspense. I saw Rose's face, her expression unreadable, a statue carved from ice and regret. I saw Haley, Remington's assistant, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and a dawning, horrified comprehension. She knew about the succession plan. She thought this was just another layer of Remington's cruelty. She had no idea. I reached the low steps leading up to the stage. I ascended them, one by one, my movements measured, my expression serene. Remington watched me, a flicker of confusion, then annoyance crossing his face. What was I doing? Was I going to plead? To make a scene? I reached the podium, the one he'd just used to deliver his grand pronouncements and his petty insults. I adjusted the microphone, the slight metallic squeak echoing in the silence. I took a breath. Then I looked directly at Remington, my father-in-law, the man who had systematically tried to crush my spirit for 5 long years, the man who thought I was nothing more than a pretty bauble, a drain on his family's fortune. My voice, when I spoke, was clear, steady, and amplified, carrying to every corner of the glittering ballroom. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my tone perfectly even, almost conversational. I held up the $20 bill. "I'll add it to the fortune I used to buy controlling interest in this company." The silence that followed my words was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air from the ballroom. Then chaos. Remington's jaw didn't just drop, it looked like it had become unhinged. The ruddy color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly, mottled gray. His eyes, moments before glinting with smug triumph, were now wide with disbelief, then a dawning, horrified comprehension. Flynn, standing frozen by the side of the stage, turned a ghostly white. He swayed slightly, his hand reaching out to grip the velvet rope of a stanchion as if for support. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. The nervous titters that had greeted Remington's insult were replaced by a collective gasp, a wave of shock that rippled through the assembled guests. People stared, first at me, then at Remington, then back at me, their expressions a mixture of stunned disbelief and dawning excitement. This was a drama far juicier than any they could have anticipated. I let the pandemonium wash over me for a beat, a conductor savoring the sudden, crashing crescendo of her orchestra. Then I continued, my voice still calm, still carrying authority over the rising murmur. "As the new majority shareholder of Shaw Corporation," I announced, my gaze sweeping across the stunned faces, "I have a few immediate announcements regarding the company's new direction and leadership." Right on cue, as if summoned by my words, the grand ballroom doors at the far end of the room swung open. Jared, my lawyer, strode in, his expression cool and professional. He carried a sleek leather briefcase, but he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, looking impeccably tailored and exuding an aura of quiet power, was Emiliano Kennedy, the mystery investor, the man Remington had been so desperate to impress. A fresh wave of gasps and excited whispers swept through the room. Remington stumbled back a step, his eyes fixed on Kennedy as if he were seeing an apparition. He looked like he'd been poleaxed. "Mr. Kennedy," I said, my voice ringing with newfound confidence, was so impressed with the detailed business plan and vision for the future that my team presented to him, a plan, I might add, that prioritizes innovation, fiscal responsibility, and ethical governance, that he decided to back a real visionary. I gestured towards the head table, which had been reserved for Remington and his most important guests. "Mr. Kennedy, please, take your seat." Emiliano Kennedy inclined his head towards me, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He then calmly walked to the head table and took the seat that had, moments before, been intended for Remington's guest of honor. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Remington was sputtering now, his face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief. This is this is outrageous, preposterous. She can't. "Oh, I can, Remington," I said, my voice dropping the dad with a chilling finality. "And I have." I turned back to the audience. "My first directives as CEO will be as follows: an immediate full forensic audit of all company financials, a comprehensive review of all executive positions and their performance, and an immediate halt to all non-essential vanity projects, including the ill-advised Caribbean resort development." Flynn finally found his voice a pathetic, pleading whine. Tinsley, what are you doing? Please, we can talk about this." He started to move towards the stage, his hands outstretched. I didn't even look at him. I simply raised a hand, a small dismissive gesture that stopped him in his tracks. He was a ghost at his own father's corporate funeral. Remington, meanwhile, was making strangled, choking sounds. He clutched at his chest, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. A few concerned onlookers started to move towards him, and then, amidst the escalating chaos, a figure detached herself from the stunned onlookers near the front. Rose. She walked towards me, her face pale, but her expression strangely resolute. I braced myself for an onslaught of maternal fury, for accusations, for a defense of her husband. Instead, she stopped before me and quietly, almost surreptitiously, handed me a small, worn leather-bound ledger. Her hand was trembling slightly. He was running it into the ground with secret debts, Tinsley, she said, her voice barely a whisper, audible only to me. Gambling debts, bad investments he hid from everyone. This proves it. Her eyes, when they met mine, held a strange mixture of defeat, despair, and was that relief? Do what you must. Then, without another word, Roseshaw turned and walked away, disappearing into the stunned, murmuring crowd, a queen abdicating a crumbling throne. I looked down at the ledger in my hand, then back at Remington, who was now slumped in a chair, being fanned by a concerned waiter, looking pale, diminished, and utterly broken. I glanced at Flynn, a shattered man, his world imploded. A cold, hard certainty settled deep within me. There was triumph. Yes, a fierce, burning triumph. But more than that, there was the undeniable, irrefutable knowledge. I did this. I had taken everything. The transition was swift, brutal, and utterly effective. The forensic audit, guided by the damning evidence in Rose's little black ledger, unearthed a cesspool of Remington's secret dealings, fraudulent expense reports, offshore accounts siphoning company funds, and a mountain of personal gambling debts camouflaged as corporate investments. The man hadn't just been running Shaw Corporation, he'd been bleeding it dry to fund his increasingly reckless lifestyle. The authorities were notified. His downfall was spectacular and very public. His legacy, once a monument to arrogant success, was now a pile of smoldering rubble. Flynn, predictably, served me with divorce papers within days. I signed them without a moment's hesitation, a wave of profound relief washing over me. His attempts at reconciliation had been pathetic, a desperate, fumbling series of voicemails and texts alternating between blaming me for destroying his family and pleading for a second chance for us. There was no us. There never really had been. He was left with nothing but his parents' tarnished name and the bitter taste of his own spinelessness. A social pariah, stripped of his inheritance and his illusions. Rose vanished from the public eye. I offered her a modest but fair settlement, enough for her to live comfortably, which she accepted through her lawyers with a quiet, dignified silence. There were no recriminations, no further contact. It was as if a heavy curtain had fallen and she had simply stepped behind it, seeking a somber peace away from the wreckage. My new office, Remington's old domain, offered a panoramic view of the city. The skyline glittered, a testament to ambition and power. My ambition. My power. Shaw Corporation was already undergoing a radical transformation, starting with its name. Phoenix Global was stenciled on the frosted glass of my new door. Maya, sharp and brilliant as ever, was my chief operating officer, her office just down the hall. Emiliano Kennedy, true to his word, had become a vital, supportive board member and an unexpected mentor, his insights invaluable as we navigated the choppy waters of corporate restructuring. The revenge had been absolute, a clean, surgical strike. But sitting there in the vast leather chair that still faintly smelled of Remington's expensive cologne, I felt something else. Not regret, never that, but a certain stark clarity. The fight had changed me, undeniably. It had chipped away at the softer edges, replaced them with something harder, more resilient. There was an isolation to this new altitude, a constant vigilance required. Trust was a commodity I now dispensed with extreme caution. My phone buzzed on the polished desk. I glanced at the caller ID. Maya. Big news, she said, her voice crackling with energy, no preamble. That acquisition target we were tracking in the renewable energy sector, their board just signaled they're open to a serious discussion. They're impressed with what we're doing at Phoenix. A genuine smile, the first truly unburdened one I'd felt in what seemed like an eternity, spread across my face. Tell me more, Maya. As she detailed the potential, my gaze drifted to a small, unassuming box on the corner of my otherwise clear desk. It had arrived by courier that morning, forwarded from my old address. Inside, nestled amongst some forgotten trinkets from my pre-Flynn life, was a letter. It was from Nana Bie, her familiar, spidery handwriting on faded stationery. I'd found it tucked into an old investment primer she'd given me years ago, a note I'd somehow overlooked until now. Dearest Tinsley. It read, dated shortly after I'd told her about my first small successful stock market venture. Never let small men or small minds define your worth. Your mind is your greatest asset. Build your empire, one brick at a time, and make damn sure it's on your own terms. They'll underestimate you. Let them. It'll be their undoing, not yours. A poignant affirmation, a voice from the past, echoing the truths I'd fought so hard to reclaim. The cost of this victory had been a toxic family, a marriage built on lies and illusions. But the gain? The gain was myself, unfettered, unapologetic. So, what do you think? Maya's voice pulled me back to the present, to the exciting, challenging future stretching out before me. Are we going for it? I leaned back in my chair, the city lights twinkling like a million possibilities. The revenge had been sweet, a necessary catharsis. But this, building something new, something lasting, something on my own terms, this would be even sweeter. Absolutely, Maya, I said, my voice firm, alive with ambition. Let's build an empire.